Hey, CARBO Brotherhood, this is Mark with CARBO, and today we're going to be going over the new spring kit for the Ruger Security-9 that we're offering. So first things first, we're going to check the firearm to make sure it's clear. We're going to check the chamber, the magazine well, and the breech face, so we have a clear firearm. So let's open it up, see what's inside the kit. We're going to have a lighter hammer spring with some material inside to help reduce that sound suppression when you fire the gun. You don't hear that ringing. A lighter firing pin spring and a lighter trigger return spring. The kit's also going to come with this helpful installation tool for the firing pin spring. So now the firearm's clear, we're going to do some trigger pull tests on the stock springs to see what kind of reduction we can get with our kit. I'm going to try to pull as even as possible. 4 pounds, 7.7 ounces. 4 pounds, 5.5 ounces. 4 pounds, 0.8 ounces. 4 pounds, 4 ounces. 4 pounds, 3.2 ounces. For an average of 4 pounds, 4 ounces, let's say. And this gun has been shot thousands of rounds, so that's probably why you'll see your trigger pull might be a little bit heavier than what I'm reading here. The tools needed for this spring kit install is you're going to need a set of punches here. You've got a 1/16, a 3/32, and a 1/8. You're going to need a bench block, a brass and nylon tipped hammer, some safety glasses, and then if you want to polish your parts as well to get a nice smooth trigger pull, we have a nice polishing kit available on our website as well. And I'll go through what parts to polish in our install video as well. And you're also going to need a Dremel tool for the polishing part. So now that the firearm's clear, we're going to remove this takedown pin right here. And to do that, we're just going to barely slide the slide back a little bit so that it can be freed up around that notch in the slide. And we're going to take a 3/32 punch, or you can use a 1/16 and then kind of push it from the right side of your firearm, and it should just pop straight out just like that. So now that that's off, the slide will come right off. And we'll start with the firing pin spring. To take out that firing pin, we're going to need to remove that rolled pin in there. We're going to be removing this middle hole here. Don't remove this pin here, that's to the extractor. So make sure you remove the pin that's in the middle of the slide, not this one that's offset a little bit. So we're going to take our bench block here, set it right up just like that, take a 3/32 punch, and we're just going to lightly hammer this out until you feel it free like that. Don't remove your punch yet. The spring tension is going to push that firing pin out really fast. So you want to put your finger over the top here like this and kind of make sure that it doesn't fly anywhere when you pull it out, just like that. As you see it bounced out. So we can tilt that, and now you have your factory firing pin spring. It's very stiff. So we'll go ahead and put that to the side and take our lighter firing pin spring here and put it right around the firing pin, just like that. And then go ahead, you see this little notch in the firing pin here. We're gonna make sure that that lines up with the hole in the slide, just like that. Because that's where the pin's gonna set. It's gonna keep it from falling out. So we wanna make sure that the pin lines up right inside that little notch there. Use a 3/32 punch here to kind of wiggle it in right. If your firing pin starts to tilt like that, just kind of use the punch to line it up. Your firing pin installation fixture here is going to help keep that straight anyway, so it's not too important right now. So once you have it in, it's easier to tilt it straight up like this. Take your installation fixture with one hand while you're holding the slide. So you want to take your punch, push your firing pin down as you're pushing in your installation fixture right behind it so that it captures it just like that. So now that we have the firing pin in the right orientation, so we can go ahead and put the pin back in through the hole. If you want to take your guide rod and slide out to do this to have a more level ground, you can. We're going to place that pin in the hole, take our 3/32 punch again, and just slightly hammer that in. And then double check to make sure that's not going too far out, but that it's still in. And as you punch it out, your installation fixture is going to fall right out because there's no more tension on it from the firing pin. And then as you can see here, I punched it a little bit too far, so we're going to take our punch and just take that pin, slightly push it back in so that it can't interfere with anything when the slide's cycling. And that's all we need to do for our firing pin spring. So we're going to go ahead, put the barrel and guide rod back in, and set our slide to the side for now. Now we're going to take a frame and remove this hammer spring cap. You can see that Ruger has this little notch in the back of the grip here. We're going to take our 3/32 punch and kind of just punch it straight in, if not a little bit down, and then kind of push it up so that slide can pop right out. So once you have the cap off, we're going to release some tension off the hammer spring here and this hammer spring seat pin by pulling the trigger and rotating the hammer up. So what you want to do is, as you're pulling the trigger, just put your finger over the hammer so that you can kind of guide it forward just like that. And it's so it doesn't just slam forward and you could possibly break your hammer. So now that there's a little bit of tension off the hammer spring, we're going to take our 3/32 punch and just kind of wedge it under your hammer spring seat pin and just kind of push it straight up, so that as you're pushing it up, you kind of just let the spring slip right off of it. And make sure to keep your finger over the pin as you do that. Kind of wedge your finger and the punch in between the pin as you pull up, so that that doesn't go flying everywhere either. So now that we have the hammer spring seat pin removed, the hammer has no more tension on it. So now we can take out these two frame insert pins. You got the rear and the front. So we're going to take our bench block again and our punch and hammer out these pins. They might fly away from you, so make sure that you keep track of them. Now that we have our frame insert pins out, we're going to set those to the side. We don't want to lose them. And now we're going to remove the frame insert from the frame. You want to just kind of wiggle it up slightly. At this point, make sure that you have your fingers over your slide stop spring and your trigger bar here, because when you pull it out, these things are going to fly everywhere. And then if you have a manual safety as well, you want to keep your thumb over that because that'll come popping out. So now that it's out, we can slowly remove that, put your frame to the side, and then take off if you have this manual safety, or you have a safety plunger here, so we can remove that, and it's going to have a little spring inside that you don't want to lose, that we can just knock out right now. There's your manual safety detent spring. It's very small, so don't lose it. We're going to keep these parts together off to the side here. And if your Security-9 doesn't have a manual safety, you just don't have to worry about that. It'll be exactly the same, just without the manual safety there. With our fingers still over the slide stop springs and the trigger bar springs, we're going to want to remove the slide stop. To do that, just keep your thumb over the spring there so that you don't lose it. It goes flying everywhere. Put that to the side, and then we're going to flip it over and then just remove the trigger bar spring. Watch your fingers there. If it comes and slaps you there, kind of hurts. So now that we got that done, we're going to remove the stock hammer spring. And to do that, we need to take out this hammer pivot pin right here. And that's as easy as just pushing it out with the punch. If you want to remove some of the tension, you can rotate the sear here, so that's just floating in there and it'll fall out. And then with the sear rotated, just kind of pull that out. You can see that the hammer has this pin that goes into it here that locks in the hammer spring. So we don't want to lose that. That falls out very easily as well. It's very loose in there. And here's your stock hammer spring that we're going to be replacing. So when you're at this point and your hammer's out of your frame insert and there's no spring attached, you can opt to use our polishing kit here and polish that up so you get a nice smooth trigger pull. And what comes in the kit, you get 3 inserts here, some rubber gloves, our CARBO Flint's metal gun polish, and a nice microfiber towel. And what you want to polish on the hammer is this little contact area that contacts the sear. That's what the sear holds onto, and it slips off as your trigger's pulled. So what we can do is also remove our sear, which is also just this one pin right here. And that's just all you gotta do is punch it out, and then you can slide that right out. And then make sure that you hold on to your sear spring here as well. You're going to want to polish up these contact areas right here, just this tip and this little bit. So what you're going to need is a Dremel, if you have one, and take your polishing bit here, set everything off to the side for right now. All right, now we're going to put our gloves on. So we're going to take our non-abrasive gun polish here, open that up, just get a little bit on the tip here, then go ahead and polish up this area. Alright, wipe off any excess polishing on there. And we can do the same on the sear here. Alright, that's good for now. And what's nice about these polishing bits is that they have a pointed tip, so you can really get into small areas. Go ahead and wipe it off, and then we can go ahead and put the cap back on. Put that to the side, put your Dremel off to the side, clean off the desk. Alright, so now that we got our hammer and our sear polished up nicely, we can reinstall our sear. And to do that, we're going to take our sear spring. Alright, so there's arm in this sear spring that we're going to slide right through this bottom hole in the sear. That's opposite of this arm on the sear, so that it fits like that. And then we're going to take that, face it down. If you have your frame insert in this orientation, slide it through the bottom there. And then you'll see this little pocket right here in the frame insert. that's where this leg is going to contact of the sear spring. So as we put it in, we want to make sure that that leg sits in that pocket, just like that. And then put it sideways so it kind of can rest easily. Take your sear pivot pin and then just line up that bottom hole with the sear there. You also want that pin to go through the inner diameter of that spring there. So now your sear can rotate forward and have some tension as it rotates back. Take our lighter hammer spring here. To put it in, we're going to orientate the hooks. You have your hammer face here, so we're going to point that to the left, and then take our hammer spring here and have the hooks facing the right as you put it in, just like that. If you do it backwards like this, you're going to have your hammer spring coils poking out, and it's going to interfere with your magazine. When you try to put your magazine in the frame, it's going to cause some problems. So make sure that the hooks are facing the opposite direction as your hammer face here. So we're going to take the hook that has the more closed end here. See, it has two different types of ends here. We're going to take the one that has more closed end, it's almost a closed loop, and put that inside the hammer. There's this little slot inside the hammer that you can put it in. And then take your hammer pin and just put that inside the hook there. So now that your hammer spring isn't going anywhere. And then you want to keep the hammer in this orientation. If you flip it over, that pin can fall out, and then you'll have to just put it back in. So you want to take your frame insert, put it facing this way as you install your hammer back in. And then again, rotate your spring forward to give it some clearance there, or you can let your sear go. As you grab your hammer pivot pin, you're going to slide that in, and then to kind of align the hole, the hammer hole with the pin, rotate your sear spring back again and kind of just wiggle it around until you find it fall in, just like that. So now that we have that done, you want to just make sure that there's still some tension, that the sear is putting some tension on the hammer so that pin doesn't slide out again as we're removing the trigger return spring. So to do this, you can either just tap it out like that. I've seen people tap it out and sometimes the trigger pin will fall out, or you can remove your safety lever and you can get to the bottom side of that trigger pin to remove it with a punch. All you need to do to remove that pin is remove this trigger safety on your trigger here. So take your 1/16 punch and just punch out that pin in there. There we go. So remove your trigger safety. You'll have your spring as well, so you don't want to lose that. And then now you can access that trigger pin there. So you're going to take your 1/16 punch again and just lightly push that out to remove your trigger pin. And now we can remove our stock trigger return spring and then take your punch and just push out that trigger pivot pin, and your trigger will fall right out. So if you don't want to lose any parts of your stock trigger, reassemble that real quick. Tap that pin back in and you're good to go. So we can set that to the side, take our stock trigger return spring and swap it out with our CARBO lighter trigger return spring. So now we can take the trigger, put it back in the frame insert here, take our trigger pivot pin, put it right through the hole, line it up with your trigger in there, take our lighter trigger return spring, put it inside the hole in the trigger pivot pin, and then you want to have this leg of this spring facing in about the 5 o'clock direction, and then hold it there with your thumb as you reinsert your trigger pin in the top. So now that your lighter trigger return spring's installed, take your trigger bar and you can go ahead and place that like that and attach it to your trigger pivot pin right there. And then you want to have this little arm in the backside behind your sear so that it can engage it. Now take the arm of the trigger return spring and bend it back and then slide it right under there. Make sure you keep your thumb over that for right now because that's going to want to flop out and then your trigger bar will go flying. You don't want that to happen. So you can flip it over with your finger still pressed up against the trigger bar and trigger return spring, and take your slide stop, place that in just like that, and your slide stop spring. So there's two different legs of the slide stop spring here. We're going to make sure that this shorter bent leg is in contact with the slide stop here. Take your spring here and place the long leg in first, kind of like that, and then we're just going to kind of push and bend the smaller leg up until it contacts the slide stop, just like that. So you have like that, and keep your finger over this area as well, because that's going to want to fly off. And now we can take, if you have a manual safety, our manual safety detent spring, put that inside this hole right here, and then take our safety plunger and slide it right over that spring. So now it's sitting in there. Place our manual safety just on top, just like that. It's going to be loose and just kind of sit resting there, so make sure that you still have it. You don't shake this around too much to where it falls off. And you kind of have it just resting just like that. So now we're going to carefully slide our frame insert back into the frame. If your manual safety is sticking up slightly, you can just use your thumb and kind of push it on, and then it should slide in nice and easily, just like that. From here, we're going to take our frame insert pins and hammer them in. The front one is going to be this longer one, and the rear one is going to have this little notch right in the middle. So just in case you forgot which one goes where, the longer, flat-looking pin is going to go in this front hole, and the smaller one with this notch in it, it's going to go in the rear one. So now we can flip the gun over, our hammer spring seat pin, and put this in this notch right here. And then it's gonna just click a little bit and kind of grab it for you if you push it down. And then what we wanna do is take a 3/32 punch and kind of grab that hook in the hammer spring there. And we're gonna latch it back on there. We're kind of just gonna pull it up and latch it back onto that hammer spring seat pin. To do that, it's easiest if your hammer is not cocked back, just like that, because that's going to add more tension to the spring. So you want to pull the trigger and kind of just wiggle that forward. So you can see that the hammer is forward now. So now we have the least amount of tension on our spring, and then just like that, kind of get your punch under the hook and then kind of pull it up and rest it right on top, and then slide your punch out. Then we can take our hammer spring cap and slide that back on. So now you've got all your springs installed, and we can go ahead and take our slide and slide that back on. If your hammer is still facing forward, just take your finger here and just push it back to at least straight up, and you hear that first click. And now your slide will slide back on nicely. Take your takedown pin, line up that notch in the slide with the takedown pin hole, and just push it in, just like that. Now that all our springs are installed, let's do a function check. Make sure that it's still clear. We're gonna go ahead. So that's perfect. And with our sound dampening material inside our hammer spring, when you pull that trigger, you can hear that the hammer spring doesn't cause any ringing. It's nice and quiet as you pull the trigger. Now let's get some trigger pull readings with our new CARBO spring kit installed. So I'm going to try to pull in the same spot as I was with the factory springs. All right, first pull is 2 pounds, 14.8 ounces. 3 pounds, 3 ounces. Pretty much 3 pounds flat. 3 pounds again. 3 pounds, 1.1 ounces. And 2 pounds, 11.3 ounces for an average of almost right at 3 pounds. So with this spring kit, you'll see your trigger pull weights go down to about 3 pounds or 3.5 pounds, depending on how old your gun is or how used it is. And there's a lot of preference between trigger reset. So if you want a stronger reset, you can choose to keep the stock trigger return spring in there, and you'll get a trigger pull of about 3.5 pounds instead of 3 pounds. Trigger pull with this spring kit is really nice and smooth. You can still get a little bit of trigger bite at the bottom here with these plastic triggers. And if you guys are interested in an upgraded trigger, maybe to remove some of this pre-travel here, leave a comment and let us know. Thanks for watching. If you're having some trouble, feel free to give us a call or send us an email. Also be sure to check out our new support site at support.mcarbo.com. Happy shooting.